Welcome back, everyone. As promised in our last video, we're going to be taking a look at 3 example problems with the cosine rule to make sure we're using it in different situations, modeling different problems, and making sure that we are using it correctly. And that way we know that whenever we see these kind of problems, we're not thrown off by all the letters and the cosines and all that. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So as you can see with our example 6 here, we want to find the length of the lake CB, which again, we're just going to go ahead and look at our diagram. Which again, in this case, we could even call this little a, we could call this little c, and we can call this little b, just again, because the opposite side, the corresponding side of the angle is just lowercase. So AB is 290, AC is 225. I'm already given that, and put that into the diagram, and I know the angle A is 72, so I want to find the length of the lake, aka the opposite side of angle A. So what does that mean? Well, it means that that side squared is going to be equal to the other side squared, so it's 225 plus 290 squared minus 2 times those numbers. And I'm going to actually have to move this down a little bit, and I'm going to multiply that by the cosine of A. So I'm going to multiply that by the cosine of 72 degrees. Now, let's put this into our calculator to make sure that we are getting this as accurate as possible, and I'm going to go ahead and show you what my calculations look like so that way you know what the correct answer is. So, once you put this into your calculator, you should get 94,398.28, blah, 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 blah. Now, remember, this is not the full correct answer because remember, we were solving for a squared. So what we need to do is take the root of this answer in order to find, well, the correct answer. So take the root of that, and we'll get 307.243. And in our class, we always go to 3 significant figures, unless otherwise stated, which would give us an answer of 307 because that 0.2 would round us down. So my answer is going to be that this lake is 307 meters across. Okay, let's take a look at another example. Okay. So in this example, we have some towns that are located at different distances. So I know that BC is going to be 8. And again, for my purposes, I'm going to write this as little a. I'm going to write this as little c, and I'll write this as little b. Okay, so all my information is put into this triangle. I want to figure out what the angles of A and angle of B are. So if you remember from our previous video, there was a formula, or I'm sorry, there's a rearrangement of our formula so that way we could solve for the cosine of the angle. Those formulas, boom, right there. C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared, all that good stuff. So what would really help me out here is that I know that if I'm going to find the angles here, the cosine of the angle, I need to know the value of all 3 sides. I don't know the value of C. That's kind of an issue. So, but what I do know is I know the angle of C, which is not an issue. In fact, that kind of helps me solve this entire problem. Because what I can now do is say that, okay, C squared is equal to A squared, which is 8, then 13 squared minus 2 times 8 times 13 times the cosine of 50 degrees. So remember, we're going to find for C, whatever this part of the problem spits out, we're going to have to take the square root of that. What you're going to find is that the answer is 9.96 kilometers. Okay, so now I know the value of C. I now know the value of all 3 sides, which means I can use my cosine rule. So what this means is that if I want to find, let's say, the cosine of A. So let's say I want to find the cosine of A. That's going to be equal to one of the other sides. So let's say 9.96 squared plus 13 squared. Because remember, I cannot use a side that is related to the angle that I'm using for my addition part here. It has to be over here with my subtraction. So I'll go ahead and subtract from that 8 squared. And when I do all over 2AB, that's 2 over 9.96 times 13. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get an answer, which will be 0.7885 blah da 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 da. But remember, that's what the cosine equals to. But I want the actual angle. And so just like in our previous videos, what we're going to do is we're going to take the inverse cosine of this value to figure out what our angle is. So I can go ahead here to the cosine of my answer. I'm sorry, inverse cosine of my answer, and I'll get 37.95. And again, I want to do 3 significant figures, so I'll go ahead and say that it is 38.0. So A is equal to 38.0 degrees. Okay. So now you might be thinking, do I have to use the cosine rule again? The answer is no, because if I estimated this angle to be 38.0 degrees, well then what I'm going to go ahead and do is just subtract both of these angles from 180, because all interior angles must add up to 180. So let's take 38 plus the 50, and then I'll get 180 minus, let's see here, that's going to be 88. So that's going to give me an answer of 92 degrees. Okay, now in this example problem, we went ahead and used easier numbers just because I'm more worried about the calculation than anything else. But when you're going and doing these problems in the future, as we'll do in the next video and every video from now on, you're actually going to not want to use the rounded number in your calculations as we did here. You're going to want to use the exact number. So it's something to think about, but for right now, we're just going to focus on what's simple in order to make sure that we're substituting the correct values into these formulas, which is what the focus of this video is. But next time, we're going to make sure that we are using the full unrounded answer in our calculations. So now let's take a look at our final example problem where we're going to find the angles of all these things because we're given all three sides. So A is 14, B is 12, C is 7. Let's go ahead and find this out. So let's go ahead and let's start with, formula says C, so let's go ahead and find out what C is. So I'll take the cosine of C, and that's going to be equal to A squared, which again, just not C squared, plus the other one that's not C squared, minus C squared, which in this case is 7, because remember that value is the one that's opposite of the angle, all over 2 times A, which we'll call 12, and then 14. Now, that's what the cosine of C is going to be. Now, what you need to remember is that we need to take the inverse in order to get C. So C would actually be equal to the inverse cosine of 12 squared plus 14 squared minus 7 squared all over 2 times 12 times 14. Okay. Now, once you put that in your calculator, what you should get is that the angle C is equal to 30.0 degrees. 3 significant figures. So now we can go ahead and repeat the same process for one of the other angles. Let's go ahead and make it A. So let's say that the cosine of A, and let me actually write it further down here so I have more room. Let's say that the cosine of A is going to be equal to 12 squared plus 7 squared. Remember, just not whatever A is over here, minus what A is, 14 squared, all over 2 times 12 times 7. There we go. And remember, we're taking the inverse cosine of this. So in your calculator, you should write inverse cosine of what this is right there. So once you put this in your calculator correctly, you should find that what you get when you put in the inverse cosine of all that is going to be 91.0 degrees. Okay, and now let me go ahead and box my answer. Now, the good news is that once you find two angles, you don't have to do this rule again. You can just subtract the sum from 180 because, again, all interior angles in a triangle must add up to 180. So what that would give you is a total answer, I'm sorry, not total answer, but an answer for B, right, B equals, we'll find that B is going to be equal to 59 degrees, 59.0 degrees. So in order to make my work all nice, I'll write that A is equal to 91.0 degrees, B is equal to 59.0 degrees, and C is equal to 30.0 degrees, and I'll box my answer. Okay, now I hope that showed you a little bit about how and when to use these properties. It can get a little complicated, but as long as you remember that what you're given in terms of the formula, cosine C, doesn't mean you have to find for C. What it really means is that if you're finding the cosine of an angle or you're finding the side length of one of the sides, you just got to know which ones are going to go where in the formula, which we know that when we're subtracting that value over there, that's the one that is corresponding to our angle, and then the other ones are just not corresponding to that angle. And with a little bit of practice, I promise you'll find the groove and it'll become a lot simpler. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.